So in this lesson of the immune response, we're going to look at inflammation, one of the most core principles that underlines medicine, disease, and health. Now, you might know inflammation is causing redness, swelling, pain, heat, and loss of function, all those nasty things. But it's so important to save your life. It doesn't just happen in infection. Inflammation, in fact, has been known to occur in almost all human diseases. All the way from obesity, where inflammation results in the release of chemicals that increases chronic disease and cancer risk, all the way down to heart disease, which is your number one cause of death in the world. The inflammation in heart disease occurs because cholesterol gets dumped into the blood vessels surrounding the heart. So before we talk about inflammation, we need to understand where inflammation occurs in this big picture of the immune response. Inflammation specifically occurs under innate immunity. So for those of you studying the HC biology syllabus, this is under Module 7, the inquiry question on immunity, specifically under investigating and modeling the innate and adaptive immune system. Now, even if you don't study the HC biology syllabus, this video is going to provide a really great overview about inflammation, why it occurs, and why it's important. So here you have your lines of defense. Remember I told you to think of the immune system almost like an army. Before the army actually advances on invaders, you first have your fort, your walls, and those are your physical and chemical barriers. If you haven't seen the lesson on physical and chemical barriers, I'll attach a link in the description below. But just very quickly to summarize, physical barriers include your skin, your cilia, and your mucus. Your chemical barriers include, for example, hydrochloric acid that's in your stomach, and the alkaline conditions of your small intestines, and the fatty acids that you produce in your skin. So all the chemicals that can impair a pathogen's ability to invade into your body. Now, when we're talking about the immune response itself, we break it down into the second and third line of defense. Inflammation occurs under the second line of defense, which is your innate immune response. The reason it's called your innate immune response is it's very self-explanatory. Something that's innate is something that's fixed and non-changing within a person. So the innate immune response is just that. No matter how many times you're exposed to a particular pathogen, it'll respond the exact same way. And that is why we say it has no immunological memory. It doesn't have this amazing ability to remember a pathogen and respond stronger and faster the next time. That's a very unique and intricate feature that your adaptive immune system has, which is your third line of defense. Now, immunological memory is so fascinating. It's almost like the memory that we have in our brain, but the cells of our immune system have this ability to remember a pathogen, remember the marker molecules that make up that pathogen, and respond stronger to it. And we actually manipulate immunological memory when we use vaccines, which have arguably been the greatest invention to mankind. Now, a few other small differences. The innate immune system is generalized in the sense that no matter what pathogen you're exposed to, even if it's as small as a protein, which is a prion, or as large as a macroparasite, like a worm, it'll still exhibit the exact same type of response. The adaptive immune system is extremely tailor-made. It responds specifically to a bacteria and responds a completely different way to a virus. Now, the other key difference between the second and third lines of defense is the innate immune response is very rapid. Think about the last time you stubbed your toe, or you might have jammed your finger in a door. You got redness, swelling, and pain within minutes to hours. It's a very rapid process, this innate immune system. The adaptive immune system, however, takes about 7 to 10 days to occur. And that's why you might notice, even if you get a nasty flu, it often takes about 1 to 2 weeks to get better. That's because that's the time it takes for the adaptive immune system to activate. So there are a number of different components in the innate immune response, but I want you to remember it's like a 1-2 punch. Although there's all of these other action moves, the key two components of the innate immune response have been bolded in the slide here. the most important component of the innate immune response is inflammation. And that's shortly followed by a process known as phagocytosis, which, to break it down, simply refers to white blood cells that eat and ingest foreign invaders. So it's so important to know that the end goal of inflammation, this complex process, is to deliver white blood cells to the site of injury or infection. That is the end goal, and I want you to keep that in mind as I take you through the story of inflammation. So inflammation is a process that occurs in blood vessels. You can see a blood vessel here, and you can see the two cell types. Now, the red biconcave discs are red blood cells, and they make up the cellular component of blood. That's about 45% of blood. Now, for every 1,000 or so red blood cells, there's about one white blood cell. That's about twice its size, and you can see that here. It's about 14 micrometers in size. And the white blood cells have one single goal. It's to fight foreign pathogens. The red blood cells, on the other hand, don't have an immune role per se. They simply increase the oxygen carrying capacity of your blood. Now, inflammation is a very broad process. Infection is just one trigger to cause inflammation to occur. There are so many other triggers, and I've listed it here. Now, you don't need to know all of them, but it makes a lot of sense. If you damage tissue, for example, you get burned, or you jam your thumb in a door, physical trauma is a very common cause of inflammation that we experience every day. Another very common cause is infection. If you've ever had a runny, stuffy nose before, that's because inflammation was occurring in the blood vessels of your nose. Now, there are so many other causes of inflammation, and one other interesting cause is cancer. Cancer pain is one of the worst pains known to mankind, and that's why we've developed drugs like heroin and opioids to treat that cancer pain. And that occurs because the inflammation around that cancer stretches the tissue, and that signals pain fibers. Now, you can see there are two things I've bolded here for inflammation that occur at the level of the blood vessel. The blood vessel gets bigger, aka vasodilation occurs. And it also forms little holes, aka vascular permeability increases. So it gets larger and forms pores between the cells of the blood vessel. Now, when a blood vessel gets larger, it allows greater blood to flow through it. And that's why you experience the red and warmth of inflammation. And you can see that right there in a person's leg. This person has cellulitis, which is a bacterial skin infection. And you can see the clear redness. And if you were to touch her leg, it would be extremely warm because vasodilation has occurred. Now, at the same time, increased vascular permeability or pores forming in between cells of the blood vessel allow fluid to escape. Now, 45% of blood is cells. The other 55% is plasma, which is simply water and proteins. So when you increase the permeability of that blood vessel, the fluid and proteins are allowed to come out, and that's what causes the swelling and the pain in inflammation. Now let's go through a visual schematic to understand this. So a pathogen is present in the tissue, and you can see that here. Now eventually it's going to encounter a white blood cell. And when it does encounter a white blood cell, that white blood cell will be triggered and start releasing inflammatory chemicals. So this is an example. One example of a white blood cell could be a mast cell. Now that's simply kind of your sentry cell. It just sits there and it's simply a beanbag of chemicals. When it sees a pathogen, it's going to ring those alarm signals. And it does that by releasing one particular chemical that's important for you to know, which is histamine. So white blood cells get activated and it can release chemical mediators like histamine. Now the histamine will go to the blood vessel and it'll cause two changes. Can you see the blood vessel here got almost twice as large? The lumen, or the space, the empty hole of the blood vessel, has gotten much larger. So more blood cells and white blood cells can travel through the blood vessel. Now you'll also notice that the cells that line the blood vessel, we call those endothelial cells, those lining cells move apart. And they move apart to allow the plasma and the white blood cells to jump out of the blood vessel. So recall, plasma is simply just water and proteins, with the main protein being antibodies, which are simply those Y-shaped immune protein molecules we spoke about in the earlier video. So now white blood cells jump out. And you can see when they get to the site with the bacteria, they'll eventually engage in a second prong attack that we'll go through in a later lesson, which we call phagocytosis. So that's all inflammation is. The redness, swelling, and pain are all a side effect of allowing the blood vessels to dilate and deliver white blood cells to the site of injury or infection. Remember, that was the key process. We're going to go through everything else in a future video. Now, here's a deeper visual image for you to understand. You can see a pin going through the skin, delivering bacteria. Now, eventually the bacteria are going to invade through the tissue and they're going to meet a white blood cell. And the white blood cell is going to trigger the alarm. It's going to release those chemical mediators, where the main one I want you to know is histamine. So then histamine goes to the blood vessel, and you can see it makes the blood vessel larger. It also causes pores to form between the cells of the blood vessel, which allow white blood cells, these yellow cells, to escape, migrate, and eventually engage in the second prong attack we call phagocytosis. Now, the goal of this is to eventually clear the bacteria, and you can see that occurring here. In our next lesson, we're going to go through phagocytosis. Thanks for watching.